Again.
You all set, Rob?
Yes, we're ready. Thank you.
Retired.
Mike, you all set? Ready to go?
Whenever you are.
All right. I'd like to call the November meeting of the full board of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District. Let's start with our Pledge of Allegiance again. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Ferrer, roll call, please.
David Bergstrasser.
Here.
Michael Asseltan.
Excused.
Albert Hayes.
Here.
Philip Klein.
Here.
Thomas Stover.
Here.
Michael Finkel.
Here.
Mark.
Okay.
Michael Clark.
Here.
Robert Leslie.
Mike.
Robert Fulton.
Here.
John Hudson.
Here.
Carol Wright. Here. Richard Farrar. Here. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any adoptions or revisions to the meeting agenda? Anybody? All right. Motion to adopt?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. All right. I have no guests. I don't believe there are any. No. All right. I have here on the agenda a motion for executive session. I think we're going to do a little change in meeting policy, which we've discussed, which will be that if we see a need to go into executive session anytime during the meeting, we will break, go into a quick executive session. We will have to ask you, our distinguished guests, to leave the room for a short period of time and discuss what we have to so that we can keep on track and keep moving a little better. All righty? So rather than a motion for executive session, we will call for it as we go along. All right. Public comment period. Mr. Byram.
Yes, I'm Peter Byron. I'm the president of the Great Sacandaga Lake Association. I appreciate the opportunity to address the board and share our member concerns. In July, in response to the Great Sacandaga Lake Association request, the board provided a go-ahead to begin outlining what we're calling the Hudson River Black River Regulating District of Broad Sacandaga Great Sacandaga Advisory Council. We obviously have to do some work on the title. Your colleague, board member Mark Finkel, volunteered and was named liaison by your board to work with our group as we developed our thoughts. We believe it's time to provide you with an interim report on our work. Our work started immediately. Board member Finkel accepted our invitation to join in a work session with the GSLA board and other lake representatives within 2 days of your meeting. You met on Tuesday, we meet on Thursday, he was there. We used our time to talk about expectations for both the lake community and the regulating district. We also identified groups which could be contacted for membership. I'll provide a quick overview of our work to date. Group membership. The steering committee to date has received membership responses from the Regulating District, Mark Finkel, the GSLA, the Sacandaga Protection Committee, Dave Cox, the Great Sacandaga Lake Fisheries Federation, the Great Sacandaga Lake Business Association, the Property Owners Association of Day, and the various towns including Edinburgh, Northampton, Day, and Mayfield. We're awaiting response from a few other entities. The idea here was to be broad, but not to be all-inclusive. In other words, we wanted to have a working structure with enough members to make sense, so we covered a broad base, but then be able to have open meetings to include other groups that wanted to contribute to the discussion. So we have worked on that. People that I mentioned before have actually recommended membership in this group, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The council function. A recommendation will be made, and this is important. This is the main part of this thing, and we'll come to this a little bit later on. But this is only a recommendation to you. In other words, what we're saying, we sat down with Mark and with other people and got some information, but the next step, and we'll talk about that also later, is to present the whole two-page summary and whatever to you to decide if this makes sense to you, and we can work together on it. So it's not something that's done in stone at this point. It's just our best thoughts as to what should be done. So here's the first part of it. A recommendation will be made that an executive committee be formed, obviously to maintain some order to this thing, that the council will meet formally 4 times a year and hold meetings which will be open to the public. The council would do 2 things. It would provide advice to the regulating district related to issues on which the regulating district seeks comment from the lake. So in other words, you had something that was going on in the lake, maybe you had a decision that you wanted to advance and you needed some more information. You said, hey, could you guys give us a heads up on what this would, how this would affect you, what you think about it? The second thing is that we would provide advice to the regulating district on issues related to the district's mission, not related to, and we talked at one of our meetings, not related to speed limit on the lake, because you have nothing to do with speed limit on the lake. You have nothing to do with fishing licenses on the lake. So what we would do is keep this focused on whatever it is that you would normally deal with. So related to the district's mission, either developed by the council or presented to the council by the lake community. The process of recommendation, and Mr. Finkel had indicated that this is the process that he would like to see, and we certainly agree with him. All council recommendations will be given to the district board liaison, whoever that might be. The liaison will forward them to the appropriate regulating district committee for consideration. We were going to forward it to 9 committees, but we can't do that anymore. We'll forward it to
We'll take care of that for
3
you.
committees. No, he'll give it to you and see where it goes. Next steps. A preliminary outline will be formally presented to Mr. Finkel for board consideration. The outline will contain draft bylaws as well as council membership. This information, by the way, is no big secret for him because he helped to develop the thing. So when we get the names, we're just waiting right now for some more recommendations from people who would like to have you appoint them to this advisory council. And once we get done with that, we'll forward the thing to Mark. The community response. The lake community representatives respond in a positive but cautionary way, as you probably anticipate. There's a wide level of support for the district council approach. The lake community has much to offer and certainly has a stake in the Great Sacandaga Lake. We look forward to making the council a success. We'll present a copy of recommendations to Mr. Finkel when we complete our task of identifying potential council members. I'm available for questions if you have any. And I thank you for letting us develop this thing. I think it'll work out to the benefit of both groups. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. And just to let you know, I do get your emails or
Good.
notices. Appreciate it. I want to, thank you. Close the door. Thanks. All right, anybody else from the floor have anything to say? Speak? Okay. All righty, getting by that. The October minutes. Any discussion? Questions? Board minutes? All right, so need a motion to approve the October board minutes. Do I have a motion?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. All right, Mr. Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll find my report beginning on page 12 of the regular board package. You'll find that what is within there, given the short span between this meeting and the previous meeting, it looks relatively mundane. However, it was anything but. First, I did want to also point out to the board and present to the board now for discussion, recommendation. On the following page, suggested dates and locations for next year's meetings, 2012. They're very similar to what we, dates and particular locations on a given month that we use this year with a couple of, with one change that I'm aware of. And that is, at this point, an informational thing. I think that that would ultimately need to be approved. This is food for thought at this point. The board would ultimately set these at the organizational meeting in January. And this month, as in many previous months, the motto and our mantra has been less is more. We are, I say we, staff, are continually examining ways to cut costs, as we should always be, but even more so given the financial difficulties the regulating district and the Hudson in particular right now are experiencing. And we staff have taken several initiatives, taken the initiative to deal with several items where we can realize savings. And I will list those. Any of the particular senior staff member that really took the lead on any one of those can certainly jump in at this point. Then one item that we've looked at is consolidating and restructuring our data, voice, and data and voice services. And let me list these quickly. We've also discussed and taken some action to suspend or defer consulting engineering work in both the Hudson and the Black. For the time being, we have before the board also a recommendation to deal with the contract to the USGS, that's the United States Geologic Survey. For anyone that's not familiar with that, we, the regulating district as a whole, pays USGS approximately
$100,000 and change per year for a 3-year contract of $300,000.
Just over $100,000 a year, primarily for the river gauges and river and stream gauges that we use. Now, I will point out that there's a memo regarding the USGS contract. There's also memo and emails that I've copied of regarding the engineering contracts in both watersheds. And another item that is important and has involved a lot of legwork is the potential relocation of the Black River Area Office in Watertown from current leased private office space to the state office building in Watertown. Black River Area Administrator Carol Wright did quite a bit of legwork in dealing with the folks from OGS in order to actually get some hard numbers to consider, and we have those also. So if we could, if just briefly, if I could ask Rick, the CFO, to just summarize the what he's his proposal, where we're at as far as the data, voice, and services that we receive, and restructuring that.
As I indicated in my memo, just some background, I've been attempting to consolidate under a single vendor if possible data and voice services for a number of years. Unfortunately, I've hit a wall each time, generally for the reason that many of the vendors that we currently use do not provide services at a reasonable cost or at all, specifically on the data side. Phone you can deal with. In some of the remote areas, which generally speaking, we're remote.
Yeah.
I have on occasion called Time Warner who generally has some very good leveraging of prices and have come across the exact same issue. Again, they don't service certain areas, and if they do, the construction cost to lay the line, whether it's VSL buried or copper across the telephone poles, is cost prohibitive. Even on the monthly basis, the payback is too many years out. Fast forward to last week, I worked, or 2 weeks ago, I got a call from Time Warner who stated, and have done this before, that yes, we now can provide services in remote areas, specifically Conklinville, and actually Mayfield, and that they would waive the one-time construction fees for both locations, Hadley and Mayfield, those costs being $13,000 and both around $13,000 respectively. They would waive those fees. However, in doing that, they would only give us the much better monthly pricing if we were to consolidate 4 locations. So we talked through some locations around, and as my analysis indicates, we went with the BRAO office, Black River area office in Watertown, the main office in Albany, and the aforementioned Bunker Hill and the Hadley location. By bundling the entire group, the data and voice services would go monthly from $2,444 to $1,400, a little over $12,000 a year. There would be one single upfront cost, 2 pieces to it, $400 for the data and phone across the board that Time Warner would charge, and the contract penalty to get out of the Albany contract, which was a 2-year contract, where 1 year into it we have to pay a year of fees. That's about $6,200. I ran that by Time Warner, and they're willing to pay $4,200 against that. So the entire upfront cost would be $1,900.
Not bad.
Which, based on the monthly savings, would get us a immediate savings payback in less than 2 months. They are 5-year contracts. Downside of long-term contracts is there may be better pricing out there. Again, anybody who beats Time Warner, just put the name on my... it's just probably not going to happen, but I think the initial 5-year savings based on alone, the Hadley Conklinville T1 line cost us $911. We could get that to $811 if we go with this deal. That figures down to $200, and it's 5 times faster. So looks to be a no-brainer to me. I offer this to the board to authorize me to move forward with consolidation, and I would present, would be 4 contracts, a contract per location, and I would present those contracts to the board as soon as Time Warner can put them together.
Anybody have any questions for Rick? I like the idea.
Sounds good.
So you just need authorization to go ahead?
Just to move forward and negotiate a contract,
Okay, go ahead.
which will be brought to the board for the board to approve the contract.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you'll get a second bite at this.
What's that? I'm sorry.
So I'm just asking the board to make a motion to authorize me.
All right. Do I have a motion to authorize him to go ahead?
Also move.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Good work.
Yep, very nice.
Okay, the other, and with respect to relocating Black River area office in Watertown from its current leased space to the state office building, there's also, and again, this legwork was done by the Black River area administrator, and do you have the numbers in front of you, Carol?
I do. We actually, presently, our office area is just over 1,000 square feet, and we are paying right now $13.50 a square foot. going to the state office building. It's a smaller area. However, I think every one of you have been into our office in Watertown, which is really not laid out as a conducive work area. I think we have a much better work area being offered. However, it is smaller, really is not going to make an effect for us, we don't believe. It's at $15.50 a square foot. However, it also includes, which is not included in right now, electricity, heat, recycling. I have to take our own recycling out and do our recycling. And what was the other?
Janitorial?
thing? I'm sorry.
Janitorial?
Yes,
I believe I read that.
$15.50 a square foot,
And how many square feet would be in the new space?
$8.50.
So,
So the net savings.
so the next
was
savings,
The net savings was.
I don't remember.
Thousands?
It was $1,200.
1,200. A
However,
year,
you're
correct.
doing apples and oranges, because, well, no, I think I had that
Was that-
too.
I think there was.
Because
there-
of having the electricity and the
Right.
heat.
Oh, right, right.
And
right.
parking.
And a secured parking space?
Thank you, yes, the secure parking spot,
okay.
actually, was a big,
Right, so the 1,200 doesn't reflect,
Savings and utilities and
right, so we'd have to
parking.
look at the, we can put a number, certainly it's
Right.
going to be,
I guess what I was
More than
comparing, we still, no, that must have, I'm including the electricity and the electricity and the heat when I gave you.
oh, you,
the
okay, fine, I wasn't sure.
Yep, yep.
Is there a lease with the state? Do we sign
There is a
the
And-
length of the lease?
I'm sorry.
Length of the lease?
They haven't sent it up to me yet, and so I haven't tied it
What
in.
would you think it would be? Minimum 5?
What, the years?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
I-
the lease, like the lease.
Sounds like minimum 5, isn't it?
You never know with that.
No?
Again, I think it's, I think you can negotiate it, but you're certainly not going to go, you're not going to go much less than 3.
I think
So
actually
whatever-
it's 3, because they did extend out my current
Okay.
expenses right now to
Well,
try
3
to
years is
compare them.
fine.
And it went out
Better
3
than
years,
5.
so I would suggest that.
Okay.
He is in the process of drafting a lease, but he didn't have it ready for me.
Okay. And it'll be workable for you, the new space?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this is the state office building. I'm not familiar with
It's
that.
the dumbest, the one right next to the building that we meet in Watertown.
Oh, okay. Is that right?
Pretty close. It's not even a block apart, right?
It's right
it's
across the
like-
road from it.
Right.
So it's 2 blocks from the office where it is now.
correct, yes.
Okay, where
Right.
John was?
Yeah, where the Tug Hill Commission offices were,
Right, that's
former
the-
board member
Got it.
John
Yeah.
Bartow.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Some members met there in executive session surrounding the U.S. Court of Appeals decision in November or December of 2008.
Okay. And how soon would this, what do you need from us right now?
Well, I would just again ask
For
the board to make a motion to
authorization?
authorize the relocation and also to give me the authority to negotiate the lease.
Okay. Any questions? We have a motion for that authorization?
So moved.
And a second? Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So moved. All right. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
I also,
Go ahead.
to continue, had mentioned that we are within both areas, have notified engineering consultants of, well, in the Hudson River area, we already have done that. Perhaps the chief engineer could speak to his email memo, if you could summarize that for us.
Certainly. There are 2 memos, one concerning Hudson River area. Engineering services, the second one, that one is dated the 20th of October. The second one is dated the 27th concerning Black River. I'll start with the Hudson River area projects concerning the spillway stability analysis and the breach analysis. Both contracts are being completed by Gomez and Sullivan engineers. And that we've identified, staff has identified that these 2 projects, that their contracted fee balance effectively will become unsustainable after this month. So as a result, the staff is recommending that because of the exhaustion of funds that are currently earmarked through the end of June 2012 for these 2 projects, that we suspend work on both of them and would not reconsider resuming that work until we've received adequate income, and either from the headwater benefit charges or the beneficiary assessments. And I've actually already, because of the nature of this work, the fact that we've consumed all of the money that is monthly, has monthly been earmarked for the two projects all the way out to next June, with unbilled completed work, we've actually already contacted Gomez and Sullivan and notified them that we wouldn't be able to continue that work. And we'll be able to make the payment for all the existing outstanding invoices, but that will, as I said, will have exhausted all the funds through June 2012 that were set aside for these two projects. And so I, too, am looking for, staff looking for, the board to accept the recommendation to suspend those projects.
Unfortunately, I'll have to ask if there's any questions. Comments?
I think it's important that, if we go ahead and take this action to basically defer what at one time was considered to be something of great importance to continue the maintenance and preventive maintenance for the dams, that as soon as we are able, this needs to be right on top of the list. So go back and hopefully, and maybe this is a question for council, if we were to get the apportionment money in a year and a half, whatever, or less, would we have to rebid these contracts?
I would guess probably not. In both instances, I think that
So we could more or less push the button and they could start again
the
fairly soon?
contractor in both instances would probably honor the contract. If they don't, yes, we probably would.
Is there a way to communicate that fact with the contractors and ask them if they might consider that within a time frame?
I think we have a pretty good understanding already.
Okay, good.
I mean, we may, at a minimum, have to extend the term of the current agreement, which may end
Yes,
prior to the
most
funding,
likely
which
we
is-
would.
Okay.
I've not gotten any indication from Gomez and Sullivan that they are concerned about picking up the work,
Okay. I think that's
even starting in July of next year.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, they fully
important.
understand that we're talking about a longer-term suspension rather than a short period.
okay.
Okay.
Did you have something?
I just actually wanted to respond to Mr. Klein's comment that, and completely agree with him, that these are and have been considered very important projects. Very important work that's being done, that the stability and health and safety of the dam and everyone around it is job one. It's part of the mission. And they are, it's not the most ideal situation to be in. The regulating district is fortunate, however, to have professional engineers on staff that either directly or through the field staff that work under them and that those that they have trained to make daily observations and recognize anything out of the norm. That their existence on staff provides that additional measure of security that I don't think if without that this type of deferral of these studies wouldn't be nearly as comfortable. I don't know how else to phrase that. We have a certain level of comfort because bottom line is we do have qualified and talented professionals that know exactly what they're looking at, and the field staff under them are also very competent, having done it for years and having been trained by the engineers. So with that in mind, is it a perfect situation? No. Is everything that we've deferred to date going to have to be picked up again and run with? Absolutely. Probably all at once would be my guess.
We'll be busy. There were no significant findings in there.
We will be receiving a report because Gomez Sullivan has completed the effort on the spillway stability analysis. But just anything that comes, any recommendations that come from that report, any additional work, that spins off of or is an offshoot of this project clearly would not be able to be acted on or move forward.
Well, we may be able to use that to take to maybe higher authority, if possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, let us know. All right.
Thank you. The second memo concerns two projects. Neither.
Hold on a minute.
Let's do
Yeah.
one. Let's do it.
Let me get-
I'm sorry. Yep.
So this would be a motion
I need a motion to authorize.
to suspend,
Suspend.
authorize the chief engineer to suspend work by Gomez and Sullivan for spillway and breach.
And breach analysis at Conklin.
Until our fiscal stability improves. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Have a second? I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Second memo is dated the 27th of October. Pertains to two contracts that we're actually in the process of finalizing and negotiating. The Old Forge Sixth Lake Engineering Assessment, contract C01 2011, and review of Stillwater Dam liquefaction analysis C02 2011. Camp Dresser McKee is the engineering firm who was awarded the engineering assessment work for Old Forge and Sixth Lake. And as you recall, the liquefaction study was completed by drew a blank on that.
Kleinschmidt?
No.
Make
Rizzo?
Thank you. Yeah, Paul C. Rizzo Associates. And there's a requirement to have that Rizzo's analysis reviewed. Kleinschmidt has been asked and provided the proposal for that work. But both of these projects, these two engineering contracts are currently being negotiated. They have a total cost of $103,900. And given the operating cash limitations in the Black River area, it's staff's recommendation that further negotiation of the contracts for each of these projects be immediately suspended. And, of course, contract negotiations could resume when there's adequate cash balances and cash flow in the Black River area. So the staff recommends that suspension of those contracts at this point also.
All right, I'm going to stage a question on this. When we moved the reserve funds, all right, it was understood that the operating funds were, I assumed, adequate.
So did I.
So what's,
Adequate.
so explain to me this one.
The operating funds, which are the only funds available now in Black River,
Right.
following the liquidation of not only their Sentinel fund, but
Right.
also their prior year surplus,
Okay.
doesn't give them a technical structural deficit. What happens is that they can operate on the assessments they've just received right through close to the end of the year, which gets them to the next assessment year. The issue is that at the point that you send your assessment out, you don't receive it the next day.
Right.
So there is a gap, there's a bridge, a funding bridge we're going to have to come up with, and I think there'll be some
Right.
discussion there.
Yes.
To get us to receiving that next assessment sooner than later, which will allow them to bridge right to their next assessment, and then they're ready to go.
In part, what Mr. Farrar is saying is that the fiscal year ends June 30th, and yet the assessments within the Black River area are not generally fully received until the end of October. September and October, they start coming in, so there is that gap. That is a part. And the other, and one of the reasons that affect that is there while as everybody recalls, the reserves were depleted and transferred in a borrowing by action of the board in August to deal with the Supreme Court order to pay those Fulton County taxes. That's just one component of it. Now, for the last, fill in the blank here, 2 years?
The
3 years.
entire current cycle, NYMO has not paid their assessment.
Yeah,
for Black River.
I forgot about that.
During this period of time,
I know we discussed this.
you know, the Hudson River area in theory funds their operations, Black River funds theirs, and then General Board, which is ED, General Counsel, CFO, Chief Engineer, and an administrative assistant, were paid for out of relative shares of the revenues from each area, given the fact that the Hudson River area for the last 3 years has been not been receiving the revenues due it. The Black River area has paid a much higher allocation than would normally be due or normally be charged, if you want to look at it that way, against the Black River funding, with no increase in assessment or total assessment. So essentially, they're paying on a yearly basis about twice as much in that ballpark of General Board as what they would have in the past, and perhaps it's actually more than that. It's probably about 2.25 times. Traditionally, they would pay 15 to 17%,
Depending on which budget year,
right. I'm speaking
As
in-
low as 15 and as high as 20.
certainly in that range, and currently they have averaging around 35, 38.
No, closer to 40.
Okay. Nevertheless, you can see that the change in that, the payment in that allocation. Now, that money is certainly due back to make that adjustment. But of course, we have to get that money in the door in the first place. And without without any reserves at all, which is what was necessary to pay those taxes, that's where that crunches things from that gap
Contributed
that the CFO speaks about from the end of the fiscal year until assessments are received.
You're talking about a $300,000 shortfall for just those two items. $200,000 on the apportionment allocation, General Board allocation.
General Board allocation.
$100,000 over 3 years for NYMO not paying their assessment.
Okay.
Question for the council. Certain people can get a Supreme Court judge to rule that we have to pay the taxes that were owed to Fulton County and the school district, and yet we can't get the Supreme Court to rule that, or ask the Supreme Court to rule that Niagara Mohawk pay their taxes to us?
The remedy for the collection of the Niagara Mohawk non-payment of their assessment on the Black River side is submission of that assessment to the county. I want to say Jefferson County in this case.
Yeah, please.
It's in both counties.
Jefferson and Lewis. Which then those counties re-levy that assessment as part of the tax on the real property owned by NYMO that we've identified as subject to the assessment. And then upon non-payment of that re-levied assessment through the tax bill, the county begins foreclosure proceedings. That re-levy takes a year to occur. The non-payment takes another year to occur, and then the foreclosure proceeding starts. I think Carol has the best information as to the status of the Lewis County and the Jefferson County real property services commencement of foreclosure proceedings against NYMO with regard to those properties. My understanding is that they haven't gotten there yet, but they will in January.
January is when,
And that's for year one.
So the process has started.
but it
Yes.
will only
Yes.
be
Yes.
1/3 of what's
Right.
owed us.
Right. So of the 100 grand, that's over 3 years. We're only talking about a third of that is winding through the second year. The
Right.
second year is probably in the first year, and the current one is,
Yet to go.
Not even there yet.
Just smacks of a double standard.
Absolutely.
It does, and in fact, well, I probably ought to deal with that. Where I'm going, I don't want to go in the open meeting.
All right.
All right, and the assessment is determined by our 3-year budget?
correct.
Okay.
So, again, the Black River has authority in those cases where the current assessment is not cut to reassess,
Okay.
to bond, to issue a tax anticipation note. All of those, as CFO, I would recommend we avoid and use as a last
Yeah.
resort, short of trying to get the beneficiaries to pay their assessments that we issue on 7/1 to pay them on 7/2, 7/30. That would solve the problem, because I think most of the beneficiaries would understand that if we levy against them,
Would cost them more.
it's going to cost us money, they got to pay.
Right.
So it would behoove them to work with us, and we certainly
I
feel
think
that's the
that's that
case.
later in the report.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So you need authorization to, which one was that?
Motion to defer the contracts, those two contracts.
Oh, okay.
Black River area at Mine and Stillwater, the follow-up on liquidation, and the
Engineering
Old
assessment.
Forge, Six Lake
Lake.
Engineering
Assessment.
Assessment, those two contracts.
Okay. Everybody satisfied? I have a motion to authorize that?
I'll make the motion.
All right, I have a motion and,
Second.
Mr. Strawberry.
okay, motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. You done, is that,
USGS.
That's where I'm at right now, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to cut you off,
I'm
sorry.
getting a kink in my neck here.
There's one last cost-cutting measure that staff recommends to the board right now, and that is related to current costs that due to the USGS. And again, if the chief engineer could speak to that, memo right there. Does everybody have a copy of that memo in front of them? If not, we have-
Memo's dated the 31st.
Yeah.
Small date on it. I think they all do. As the executive director mentioned, we maintain contracts with the USGS for measurement and publishing of stream discharge and reservoir water elevations at 17 stations in the Hudson and Black River area. The annual cost for the services is for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2012, is $106,640 approximately. The current outstanding invoice for expenses incurred January 1st through June 30th of this year is $50,639. There's a breakout provided for the Hudson and Black River areas. And the anticipated 3-month period invoice for July through September of this year is an additional estimated to be another $25,340. And so the staff's recommending that the current invoice for services January through June and the anticipated invoice for services July through September be postponed until July 2012, or when there's adequate cash balances and cash flow in each area. Again, we're looking for a motion on
Well,
that recommendation.
What are the consequences of suspending the payment, other than they don't get their money?
I think if we ran long enough, and long enough is hard to put a finger on.
I know.
Probably, in our particular case, more than 6 to 9 months. USGS may look for another cooperative to support those gauges.
Okay.
Or, and if they're unsuccessful in finding, assuming that they took that route to start with, they might terminate the services of those gauges entirely.
But they will continue to provide the service for a while.
Well, I'd imagine for a while they would, yeah. They go through a process. Right now, actually, there are at least a couple dozen gauges that they are going to be decommissioning, that they've been, for at least 6-8 months now, been looking for cooperatives to join with them to continue operation of those gauges. Because for whatever reason, the previous cooperative broke a contract or no longer funded that facility.
Okay.
And so they do go through a process of many months trying to entertain or entice other folks to join on. And I think in the meantime, those gauges continue to operate.
Okay.
But certainly that you would get to a point, they would probably get to a point where they, if they didn't have the funds, wouldn't be able to operate them. And they would discontinue those gauges. So
right.
I don't think that'd be any sooner than 6 months.
Good. All right, thanks. Any other questions? I need a motion to authorize,
To defer
oh, wait a minute.
USGS.
You could defer that. Need a motion?
So moved.
Any second?
I'll second.
All right.
So, second.
Our motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, we have another issue to discuss that's we want to consider executive session for.
Okay, pertaining to real estate?
Pertaining to real estate.
The proposed sale or lease of
Okay.
one of the sticks of the bundle of interest in real estate.
Okay. So we're going to have to enter into executive session on a matter pertaining to the sale of real estate. And I would like to include the executive director, general counsel, probably Rick, and the chief engineer.
Yes.
We're going-
As long as we are going into executive session, I have 2 brief litigation matters that we could probably dispense with at the
Okay.
same time.
That'd be fine.
One pertaining to the 5 counties and the other pertaining to Sense.
All right. All right, so I need them, are we going to need John and Carol? No. All right, so I want to go to executive session. I need a motion. Someone please make a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Stone.
Mr. Sullivan, do I need a second? To go into executive session? Anyone interested? No. Mr. Finkel? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, opposed? So moved.
12:10.
Thank you very much. We'll get through this as fast as possible.
That's not, I like,
Considering I don't know where
that's not true.
printed from,
Hang on to it.
call up Ann.
But I have yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so we're back in session. There were no actions taken while we were in executive session, so we're going to move on. Are you done with your report?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So let's get to the contract portion of the meeting. The resolution to extend contract. Do you need a motion on that? Sensi?
Yeah, basically it's, David Sherman represents the district. The contract has expired. We're still waiting the decision of Judge Alisi in the Sensi matter.
Okay.
and want to just extend the term of the contract for another year.
All right. Do I need a motion to extend that contract? All right, Mr. Klein, have a second?
Essentially
Stover?
resolution.
The Sensi resolution. Motion by Mr. Klein, second by Mr. Stover. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. All right, staff reports. Committee reports. Mr.
I see that on there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Down here, we have a resolution to approve the revised management exemption guidelines. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Leslie.
You brought it to the full board.
Yeah.
Yeah, these come from a brief discussion this morning in the Governance Committee meeting, to whom these were commissioned by the chair at the end of the last meeting. We have now had the management exempt guidelines before the board at 3 meetings in accordance with the board's policy on policies. These revisions to the management exempt guidelines could be acted on at this point by the board. There are no changes to the revisions from either the first or second reading of those revisions. The one change is in Article 1, under attendance, paragraph 4, which articulated the concept of a flex schedule. And staff had proposed, and the Governance Committee Chair has now also proposed elimination of that language from the management exempt guidelines. There is a resolution.
No, it's not in there.
I don't see it, yeah.
So we
Oh.
failed to include it. That's not in there.
No, it's not in. It's not in this packet.
It's not in this packet. There
That's
was a
okay.
resolution prepared which basically, through which the board would adopt these,
These changes.
and that resolution would not change from the last reading.
Okay.
Yeah. Make a motion to
Bring it
bring
to
that
full
to the
board?
full board.
All right, we'll bring it up to the full board. So I need a motion to approve the resolution for the revised management exempt guidelines that we've read for had 3 readings. So Mr. Stover, there's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Hayes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thank you. Mr. Leslie, your report, General Counsel's report?
Yes, my report begins on page 40, and in the interest of brevity, ends on page 40. We briefly discussed in executive session the status of the 5-county suit. Certainly willing to answer any questions that anybody might have. We also briefly discussed the Niagara Mohawk federal court case. A question was asked regarding that while in executive session. Basically articulated that the argument before the Second Circuit is scheduled for December 2nd. Other than that, my board report pretty much outlines what we had worked on. You can imagine that the whistleblower policy and the code of ethics revisions, as well as the other things, took the bulk of my time.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to just recommend that council and the executive director go down to Washington and attend that oral argument so that we can have a firsthand report.
New York City.
New York City.
New York City, I'm sorry. Even better. New York
Easier to
City
see from-
to, so we can get a firsthand report back on the proceedings? Okay.
And the appeal, I know I spoke to you about it, the appeal we received from the 5 counties, there wasn't anything new and nothing significant?
Well, yeah, if you'd like to have an in-depth discussion regarding what was in their appeal and what our proposed response would be, I would suggest that we go to executive session on that.
No.
In brief, though, it does not appear that the counties came up with any significant new
That's all.
argument or twist on their argument.
That's all. Leave it at that. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. I can't think of it. All righty. Mr. Chief, our fiscal officer?
Mr. Chairman, my report, I provided the board with the actual financials. The balance of my report is on page 41 through page 60. I'll just highlight a couple of areas. First off, the Hudson River general fund balance as of the close of October was approximately $250K. Again, I mean, we're doing things to stabilize the balance, and the only significant one-time expense coming up that would be the pension bill, retirement pension bill, which we have the option to defer payment till February, I believe. We generally pay in December, but you pay a little bit of an increase if you pay it in February. I'm going to recommend to the board that we reach out to pension and retirement and seek their guidance as to whether or not we can make monthly payments, convert the annual pension bill to a monthly payment. That would then convert all of our one-time significant expenses, such as the commercial insurance, to monthly payments, and it's just going to be a whole lot easier. First of all, it's going to improve our cash flow month to
Right.
month.
Yeah.
It's also going to make analysis of the cash flow a lot easier.
Okay.
Second thing, for the Black River, I have previously and up to this date only provided the board with a Hudson River area cash flow analysis. Beginning next month, I will include a Black River. It'll be the Hudson River report with the Black River piece on the bottom. I'll work on it. I have a first pass. I think it's fairly understandable at this point. And in terms of their budget cycle and their cash flow, again, I mean, they're fairly static environment, and now upon receipt of the majority of their assessments, they're now up to about 85% of their billed assessments, or 725,000 of the 857,000. That now gives them the big chunk of their assessments to carry them through till at least the end of the fiscal year, which is June, at which point there'll most likely be the need to do some kind of bridge to get them funded through the receipt of their next assessment. An early receipt of the assessment
Right.
will negate that, and we'll be working on what we can do there to make that happen. Lastly, draft budget development schedule is on for this next upcoming 3-year cycle. I have drafted a budget development schedule, which is on page 44. I submit that to the full board's review, and at some point I would recommend that staff meet with the chair of the finance committee this month, early next month, to talk about the strategic aspects of the budget, and then probably have a finance committee meeting, hopefully when we're not having another committee meeting, so we can actually have them on the same day, but we'll work that as we need to work it, and I think the finance committee can do whatever they want to do in terms of approving or adopting this schedule,
Okay.
which I think is the critical first step.
Right.
And I'd be seeking input from the committee and the full board in terms of what I've sketched out here as a first pass. And that is all I have. If the board has any questions.
Not at the moment. I know we're running on thin ice, so. Appreciate your diligence. I appreciate your diligence. Thanks. Any questions from anybody? No. All righty. Chief Engineer's report.
Thank you. My report begins on page 61. Please can keep in mind, too, that this report only includes data through about the middle of the month, but that being said, we're at average or maybe slightly below average for precip, actually in both areas. And coming off of the previous 2 wet months and a lot of storage, both our inflow and our release from reservoirs were above historic average in both areas. And in terms of reservoir elevation, Great Sacandaga Lake right now is about 7.5 feet above our target. Indian Lake is about 1.1 foot above our target. And pleased to say that Stillwater, we're only about 7/10 off. Six Lake and Old Forge are both about 0.2 of a foot off a target. The latter 4, Indian Lake, Stillwater, Six Lake and Old Forge, are tracking fairly well in terms of drawdown for springtime refilling. And we're certainly pulling Sacandaga down as quickly as we possibly can, maximizing our release whenever we can, and then some, I should say, on occasion, and getting rid of as much water as we possibly can. Any questions? I'd be glad to take those.
I was contacted by a couple of the river outfitters, wondering if we could, I'm not sure how you communicate back and forth as to what kind of water they're going to have in order to run their rafting trips.
Well,
They wanted if we could improve it a little bit up in the Indian Lake area.
I'm sure they do. For a period of time when we had made some adjustments toward the end of their rafting season, after we had made some adjustments backward, reduced our releases, I had received a call, and I do occasionally receive calls from the river outfitters, both on Sacandaga as well as up on the Indian River.
So did I.
And so we also do communicate with similar firms, different people up in the Black River area and on the Moose River. And to the extent we can without substantially or creating any long-term impact, we certainly try to accommodate their needs. And
I guess,
in the case of Indian Lake, we ramped up the release for brief periods of time to coincide with the release of water that they were making at Abenaki for their whitewater rafting events. And it allowed us to continue to hold the water we needed to at that particular point in time in Indian Lake Reservoir, but also satisfy their short-term needs, which were only a few hours of about 1,000 CFS, which they release out of Lake Abenaki, and with about a 4-hour release, we were able to make up the difference and kept everybody happy for that period of time.
he was just wondering if instead of the 1,000 CFS release, reduce a little bit over a longer period of time, and instead of going 1,000 when you're done, drop it back to 100.
And a lot of that is certainly dependent upon where we are in reservoir elevation,
That's right.
how quickly we want to get back down to a target.
And what the town actually does itself from releases from
Right.
Abenaki, right?
In this particular case, we were, it was more than just making a release to help them out in a dry situation. They had, the village itself had not made changes in their gate release, even though they were notified. So they continued a release that was pretty excessive
Yeah,
and depleted a lot of water out of Lake Abenaki. Not only that, but I understand that they have not replaced flashboards on their spillway, so the reservoir is lower to start with. And it was a combination of factors that limited their ability to make a release, but we were able to compensate them.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
Sounds like communication needs to be improved.
It
on
is.
their part
Yeah.
and the village.
It does need to be improved a little bit with their operators, and certainly in terms of,
The town of Inlet operates Abenaki?
yes, I think it's the village.
Their town, the village of Indian.
The village of Indian Lake does, and we certainly contact them immediately once we've scheduled a change and release and given them plenty of time to get out there and make a change at Lake Abenaki. But
Now, we flow into Abenaki, or how does it?
yeah, directly. Actually, it's almost directly into this
Okay.
small section of the Indian River, where it's riverine rather than backwater from the dam at Abenaki.
Okay.
But for all intents and purposes, we do.
All right. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, we'll get on with the Hudson River Administrative Report.
Thank you, Mr. Bergstresser. My report starts on page 91 through 96. Just a couple highlights. I gave a PowerPoint presentation on the forming of the Hudson River and Black River Regulating District to a group of senior citizens last month, and we also organized a tour for them at the Conklinville Dam so they could get a visual of how we kind of release water and what the dam looks like up there. So they took a little tour.
Okay, from the road, I hope.
Actually, I did check with our insurance, or I had Rick check with the insurance company to make sure it was okay to take them down just to the control house and show them the operation in there and then back out and no further. So. And I participated in a safety inspection at the Indian Lake Dam. And as my report is 91 through 96 shows all the other activities that took place that month. In a matter of time, I'll cut it short. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Very good.
Oh, that's good. No, I didn't have any when I saw it. Any questions for Mr. Hudson?
No.
All righty, thank you. Ms. Wright?
Thank you, Chairman Bergstresser. My report starts on page 97, and I guess the weather has been conducive for us in the Black River area to finish up our fall projects. We did our final fertilizing, liming, and Stillwater on the dikes and Stillwater. We also did, for our first time, one on the Sixth Lake Dike, and we will be pursuing that next year. We also have removed the log booms at Sixth Lake and at Old Forge, and prepared the necessary dam road, which takes us down to the dam up at Stillwater. We've raked and put gravel on, and I think we're pretty well ready for the change of seasons. The Gate 3 in the well, we are about ready to put in this stem. We're doing a little bit of resurfacing on the inside of the well in Gate 3. So that should be operational, I would think, in a month, within the month. So, if you have any other questions?
So the stem replacement's going well?
Stem replacement is going well. The stem is here, but we want to do a little more repair surface work.
Good.
No snow up there?
No snow. No, we just have it down this way. But we'll let you know the first fall.
Good.
Oh, this one. Nothing.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, any questions or comments on anything from the board about anything? You want to stump staff? Not yet, huh? Okay. I need a resolution for the next board meeting, which would be held in Watertown City Hall on December 13th 2012. Need a motion?
I so move.
I need a second.
Second.
Mr. Hayes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Need a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Albert, go home and take a nap.
All right, second? All right, Mr. Finkel, second. All in favor? Thank you very much, everyone.